Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to all the participants in this webinar session, organized in the context of the third launch of the EWES Challenge Massive Open Online course. This session will focus on EWES generation, trends, and key messages from the Global EWES Monitor Report 2024, published by the ITU and UNITAR encircling. My name is Francesca Cenni, and I will facilitate this session on behalf of the BRS Secretariat, as well as providing a brief introduction to the 2025 version of the MOOC. In today's session, which is scheduled to last 1 hour, after an initial introduction of the MOOC, Ruediger Kuehr will introduce trends and key messages from the Global EWES Monitor Report 2024 for about 30 minutes. This will be followed by a Q&A session for about 25 minutes. The presentation given today and the recording will be posted on the webpage of the webinar session on the web pages of the Basel Convention. It is my pleasure now to present the learning path and the courses which are included in the EWES Challenge MOOC. I will share my presentation. You can, yes, you can see it in full screen. So the EWES Challenge MOOC was developed in partnership between the BRS Secretariat, the EIT Raw Materials, a knowledge and innovation community established by the European Union, the University of Leuven in Belgium, the International Telecommunication Union, and the World Resources Forum, a Swiss think tank on sustainable use of world resources with the collaboration of the WHO. The new version of the MOOC is hosted on the FutureLearn platform and is available in English and in Spanish. The participants can obtain certificates for all the courses and request also an overall certificate. The learning path is shown here in this slide, is from course 1 to course 5, and I will introduce shortly the content of the 5 courses. Course 1 on the e-waste challenge includes an introduction to e-waste, issues, impacts, and solutions. Course 2 focuses on e-waste and children health and presents the latest knowledge on human exposure to e-waste from dismantling, recycling, and final disposal. Course 3 on reducing e-waste by design standards, business and policies focuses on policies like EPRs and ITU standards on e-waste. It is designed for policymakers and regulatory authorities. Course 4 on inclusive and sustainable e-waste recycling presents best and worst practices and material traceability standards in the secondary extraction of metals from e-waste. This course is designed for recyclers in developing and developed countries. Course 5 is new, and it is directed to recycling facilities wishing to receive an e-waste recycling certification, as well as to auditors and accreditation entities, since it focuses on e-waste management standardization and conformity assessment. You can join the MOOC through this link or through the web pages of the Basel Convention, and you can register and participate in each and every course from the Basel web pages or from the FutureLearn platform. Thank you, and I will pass now the floor to Ruediger Kuehr of UNITAR encircling to introduce the presentation of today. Ruediger, you have the floor. You have to unmute. You are currently muted.
Thank you, Francesca. That's a technical glitches we are always facing. Not still used so much to the video conferencing. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. So my name is Ruediger Kuehr. I'm with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, and I'm heading the Sustainable Cycles program, which migrated from the United Nations University a couple of years ago to UNITAR. Unfortunately, you do not see my portrait or my video at the moment because I'm stuck in a coffee shop here in Bonn because my train got stuck this morning and I couldn't make it to my office just in time. So I now have a silent room here, but not with the bandwidth and the atmosphere I'd hoped for originally. But I still hope that you find this presentation helpful at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do now is to introduce you a little bit our work from the UNITAR Cycles team, but most importantly, our statistical flagship activities as such, which is the Global EWaste Monitor. So the cycle program joined UNITAR after transitioning from the UNU in 2022. But our work dates back for more than 20 years now, and we are conducting a lot of research, policy advice, training, and capacity building since. And we started our endeavors more around zero emissions, etc. But we then focused step by step on the latest technologies such as computers, etc., in order to assess really how they are impacting our daily life and the environment as such. And some of you might have come across also a publication I did together with Eric Williams nearly 25 years ago, which was on computers and the environment. So our focus, maybe you can go back to the other slide still, that would be appreciated, because we are focusing very much on electronics and we are known also for this. But on top of this, we have also batteries, plastics, automotives, textiles, circular economy, zero emissions, waste, etc. in our focus. So quite a portfolio of activities. And you can see some of my team members here also introduced with the portraits. Please switch slides now. So our main focus is to provide research or conduct research, and here to focus then also on policy advice and partnerships. And this was also one of the findings we had from the work we did on computers and the environment in the early 2000s, because at that time hardly any solid data was available when it came to e-waste as such. It was anecdotal. What we felt, okay, we need a little bit more to really provide policy advice, establish partnerships, and come up with solutions. So policy advice and partnerships is one pillar. The other one is trainings and capacity building, because it's one of the key mandates also of UNITAR as being the lead training organization also within the UN system. And then we do a lot of quantification work, statistics, etc. And one of these outputs is definitely the Global EWaste Monitor we will be coming to quite soon. So please switch slides now. Can you switch to the next slide, please? Oh, I don't see it. Now here it is. Sorry, please go one back. Sorry. When it comes to policy advice, we are playing a major role in this regard vis-a-vis a number of players, and most prominently also here the European Commission. So we have been provided a lot of advice in conjunction with the WEEE directive, Article 7 and 11. And the WEEE directive is the directive in the European Union governing e-waste treatment, etc., which is then finally implemented also by all the member states. And there are different aspects to look into when it comes to recycling activities, reuse, etc. These are driven then by the different articles. And that's one of the key activities we are performing. At the same time, we are helping also with the exemptions to the restriction of hazardous substances directive, the ROS directive as such. So that's also work we are conducting. We perform studies on specific exemptions also on the restrictions of end-of-life vehicles. And at the moment, it's keeping us quite busy. We do it in cooperation with a few other players that we are assessing the impact of the WEEE directive in order to find out what can be improved also in future. Does it show the effects the European Commission and the member states want, and so forth? At the same time, we do a lot of projects, partly financed also within the UN system, also by players such as UNEP, UNITAR, ITU, and so forth. But we are also members in consortia under the Horizon Europe, for example, which is a big funding scheme of the European Commission. And one prominent project is, for example, the EcoSuite project, in which we are delivering conclusions and recommendations to the EC and its member states, but also national organizations, consumers, to improve the collection of small e-waste and portable batteries. Because as we will see in my presentation today, one of the major issues we are facing in consumption or in conjunction with e-waste is definitely the low collection rates we are all confronted with. Please switch slides. Partnerships. Partnerships is very important for us from the very beginning. This is simply because e-waste is such a challenging topic involving so many different stakeholders that in order to really assess and monitor the situation, but at the same time also to propose possible solutions, it requires multi-stakeholder partnerships. And this is why we have, for example, established the Global E-Waste Statistics Partnership together with the ITU. Long time ISWA, the International Solid Waste Association, was also partnering with us in this regard in order to introduce latest e-waste statistics on global, regional, but also national level and monitor it so that we see that under certain conditions, things might also be changing. At the same time, we feel it's very important also in light of the principle of having one UN. Please go back to the other slide still. The e-waste coalition as such, which is a kind of coalition of mainly UN players in order to synergize and harmonize their activities around e-waste. And then we are doing also a lot together with the Basel Convention and its different partnership initiatives. Definitely referencing here PACE 2, PACE 1, MPPI, we have been all very much engaged in and also members of, but also the Enforce project, which was created in 2013 to improve the cooperation between entities and delivering capacity building activities and tools on preventing and combating illicit traffics. So now please move to the next one. This illustrates very briefly on one slide our training and capacity building activities. We have a lot of trainings events, and probably you have already come across our various e-waste academies. We have them for scientists, for managers. We have them for startups also in this domain, which are then called the business boot camps. We are performing e-waste statistical trainings, so to train really statistical organizations how to come up with the latest data in this regard. We do waste crime academies for authorities, including judges, prosecutors, and so forth, in order to introduce to them also the complexity of the issue. Out of this, definitely we are generating various materials and guidelines for authorities, training manuals on EPR, the extended producer responsibility, other toolkits, step papers, and so forth. And we are also from time to time doing webinars, or at least contributing to very important webinars, such as this one, the MOOC, which we consider also as very important and very useful in order to keep people abreast to the issue. Yeah, please switch. Here you can see, and this is something I can also wholeheartedly recommend to you, our e-learning course on how to prevent e-waste. This we developed about 1.5 years ago. It's quite engaging. It's a self-paced training course on e-waste, also building on the numbers at that time we introduced with our global e-waste monitors. And you will also receive a certificate at the end of such kind of course. And the benefit is definitely that it's substantially self-paced. So maybe try it out. Then you see we have other means also in place: waste crime, waste force project, technical guidelines, and so forth. Please switch slide again. And finally, coming now to this quantification, and this is also the bridge to the actual numbers I want to introduce related to the global e-waste monitor, because quantification is done by us through the global e-waste monitor, but as said, we do it also on regional basis. We've done it for the Arab states, for the Commonwealth of Independent States, so the former Soviet Union, Latin America, East and Southeast Asia, West Asia, Western Balkans. But we do it very precisely and very detailedly, also looking into the stakeholders, etc., on a national level. So national e-waste monitors for Botswana, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Namibia, Netherlands, and so forth. And one thing which is probably also very much of relevance in today's discussion is these transboundary e-waste flows. And we did the first ever also transboundary e-waste flow monitor a while ago. In my consideration, it requires now an update, but it's very important as well. Then we have the e-waste statistic guidelines and very many different projects, consortium projects, which are also generating at the end of the day data, which is then also going into our global e-waste monitor. And now we are finally coming to that. So please switch slides. So the global e-waste monitor, we have started in 2014 with the first edition. It's a biannual, basically, or triannual publication, because it requires a lot of research also in the background. And this is why we cannot do it on annual basis. But it has been considered as the one-stop shop really when it comes to global e-waste data as such. And as said, it's a cooperation of UNITAR and ITU because of the Global E-Waste Statistics Partnership. And this is now the cover you can see here of the latest Global E-Waste Monitor, published in spring 2024 with data from 2022. And we have already started now working on the next Global E-Waste Monitor as well, which will be launched in early 2027 as per plans, but the research has already started in this regard as well. So please switch slides. So what are we doing? What is the framework of this statistics basically? I mean, in the first place, we are looking into the production of electronics and its trades. And from this, we also have then a better understanding what is placed on the market. And according to the use phase, we have a better understanding also what e-waste is generated. This is in a nutshell and very generally speaking, really what we are doing with our e-waste statistics. And then there are different routes, as you can see. The formally collected route, the e-waste in the bin route, the route where e-waste is collected outside of a formal treatment, or the route where e-waste collected outside formal, so this informal treatments, etc. And this is what we try to illustrate and calculate also with our global e-waste monitor. So please switch slides again. So the stunning news of that monitor is definitely that in the year 2022, we generated 62 billion kilogram, which is 62 million tons of e-waste globally speaking, and which equals 7.8 kilogram per capita. But the shocking news as well is here that only 22.3% of this e-waste was documented as formally collected and recycled in an environmentally sound manner. That doesn't mean that all the rest is only burned or landfilled, etc., but it's not documented at least. And that's really the shocking news in behind. And I was making it already a reference point earlier that collection is really a major issue we are still facing with a global perspective. What does this data show as well? Please go back again to the other slide. Is that since 2010, the growth of e-waste generation is outpacing the formal collection and recycling by almost a factor of 5. So what does it mean? It means that there is a response by industry and policy players to this stunning numbers, but the increase of e-waste generated since 2010 is so immense that almost by a factor of 5, the responses do not show any effect. And it's even going in the opposite. So please switch slides. What e-waste generated per type? Usually we go with a normal classification we see also in the European Union. So having small equipment, large equipment, temperature exchange, screens and monitors, small IT lamps, and finally photovoltaic panels. And the largest is definitely the small equipment. Photovoltaics are very much on the rise. We will see here a tremendous increase over the next couple of years. But the reason that the small equipment is so on the rise is simply also because more and more gadgets are now introduced with either a plug or a battery. And we find it in our children rooms at home. We see it under the Christmas tree with a lot of games and toys even upcoming now with batteries, etc. And this is all fueling the rising e-waste mountain. So please switch. So if we look to the overall trends, we can see that by the year 2010, only roughly 60 million tons were introduced or placed in the market, but we will soon be seeing 120, so a duplication by the year 2030. And this shows also the rise in e-waste generated because we started with 34 million tons. In the year 2022, we have been at 62 million tons, and we are expecting already in 5 years from now 82 million, and by the year 2050, more than 100 million tons. So it's a kind of avalanche also happening here when we look to the global e-waste trends. Please switch slides. Transboundary movements. This was one of the triggers also for us to really heavily engage also in the actual statistics. And at the moment, we can see that roughly 5.1 million tons of e-waste are shipped internationally, out of which roughly 3.3 million tons of e-waste are shipped. Hold on, I have an issue in seeing it at the moment. I have a small technical glitch here, but I hope to get it sorted quickly. It doesn't work, but I can manage somehow, I guess. So, but the key finding is that roughly 1 million tons of e-waste are shipped uncontrolled from high income to middle or low income countries. That's at least according to the latest data available. And though it's a smaller amount than originally anticipated 10, 15 years ago, it's still massive. And this is something, especially also the Basel Convention is working against, trying to reduce these amounts substantially, to set up better means, etc., to control these kind of shipments. Because looking to the pure numbers, there's definitely reason to say that at least for some of the e-waste arising in the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere is a kind of a graveyard of our luxury goods. On the other hand, we must also be realistic now that nowadays the hunger for the latest electronic products in the southern hemisphere is enormous, and there are now by far more generating their domestic e-waste than whatever is shipped into the country. But these shipments definitely must be looked to very carefully as well. So please switch slides. This overall is illustrating a bit really the routes we have seen from the overall shipments happening around the globe. Usually it's quite common that these shipments take place from, for example, Europe, most prominently to Africa. Only very few goes to Asia. From North America, predominantly to Southern America, and from East Asia, predominantly then also to Southeast Asia as such. So these are the most common routes we have seen. Please switch. E-waste generated and documented as formally collected and recycled by region, that's also very important to have an understanding here how we are deriving to the global average of only 20.3% of formally documented, collected and treated e-waste. In Europe, we are above 40%, 42.8%, whereas in Oceania, only at 41.4%, in the Americas at 30%, in Asia 11.8%, and in Africa, unfortunately, only at 0.7%. This also illustrates, first, no continent is outstandingly positively good. There's still enormous room for improvements, even in Europe, in Oceania as well, but also Americas. On the other side, it also illustrates clearly that in some parts of Asia and in most of Africa, we need to substantially improve collection and final treatment because it's by far too low, having all the negative environmental and health impacts these informal treatments are triggering. Please switch. This is again here now a breakdown really what is basically collected and recycled by different categories. And you can see here that when it comes to small equipment, for example, 20.4 million tons of small equipment is collected and generated, whereas only 2.4 million kilograms are treated appropriately. The highest rate we have when it comes to documented, collected and recycled is when it comes to temperature exchange equipment. And definitely also for screens and monitors and the other larger equipments. But for all of them, it's not even half of what is generated, illustrating clearly the needs here we need to improve substantially. And one of the rising issues is definitely the photovoltaic panels in future, also given the fact that at the moment recycling of photovoltaics is very limited, also from a technological point of view. Please switch. Recovery of metals, also very important topic, because in comparison with other waste streams, e-waste is usually very much regarded as a waste stream of economic interest because it contains valuable, scarce metals and so forth. However, the recovered metals from the total metals in e-waste is only 60%. Again, 40% is kind of not collected and treated properly and kind of lost. And even when it comes to the precious metals in e-waste, like gold, like silver, palladium, and all the others, only 20% is collected here and treated appropriately. And we could add now one additional number because it's very hot in the media at the moment. All the critical raw materials or the rare earth even, where the recycling rate, the collection rate, especially when we speak about rare earth, is almost 0%. So no regain of these materials from e-waste at the moment, despite the fact that there is an enormous political will. But to be very clear here, at the moment, the prices for rare earth are cheaper on the global market from direct mining instead of generating it back through appropriate recycling means. So please switch slides. Yeah, this is still remembering about the critical raw materials in global e-waste. So what I was just referring to earlier with low or zero recycling efficiency at the moment. Next one. The importance of legislation. At the moment, we see only that of the 193 member states of the United Nations, only 81 countries have adopted an e-waste policy, legislation, or regulation. And of this 81 countries, only 67 countries have legal provisions on EPR for e-waste, and only 36 countries have provisions on e-waste recycling rate targets, and 46 have provisions on e-waste collection rate target. What we can generally see is when a policy is in place, when it's then supplemented by EPR, etc., the collection, the recycling, etc., is substantially improving. So against this, there is definitely a logic that with the legislation in place, the situation as regards e-waste is substantially improving. So this is why we are appealing on all countries to take the necessary measures, to develop policies, to have systems in place, etc., because it will help to substantially improve the collections. Please switch. What we can do about it? I mean, that's probably a scenario we have developed that, principally speaking, we can reach 60% of collection and proper treatment if we install better legislations in all countries in the world. If we improve the formal e-waste management, that means that we have improved separations of printed circuit boards and so forth. If we do better inclusion of the informal sector, so that means that lower and lower middle income countries improve the working conditions of the informal sector with a view to collecting and managing 40% of their e-waste in an environmentally sound manner. And if we control management of transboundary movements of used EEE, electrical and electronic equipment, and illegal dumping of e-waste much better, then we can reach the 60% aspirational scenario. And this would also turn around things, because at the moment, globally speaking, we have to substantially invest in the e-waste treatment. But if we are turning things around as per this scenario, it becomes also a money maker. So it becomes a lucrative business, so to trigger and stimulate engagement in this regard. So please switch slide. Yeah, this is a little bit the implications of the aspirational scenario I've developed here. I don't want to repeat it again because of time reasons, but I think it's giving you the concrete data here again when it comes to numbers, how much can be saved, how much we can gain, how the cost benefits, etc., are associated to each other. And please switch again. Now, that's something my colleague Vanessa and I have prepared on the inspections of e-waste imports in Tanzania. What I would like to do in order to have sufficient room also for question and answers right now is to skip this part, but we can keep it probably in the slides portfolio, which is also made available by the Basel Convention. It's showing very concretely what we did in Tanzania when it comes to these illegal imports, the imports of used equipment and so forth, and giving quite some interesting insights and guidance also how things are looking here on the ground. But overall, I would like to stop here now to have sufficient time for questions and answers. So Francesca, I'm looking to you now this way. Shall we stop here in order to go into the question and answers for having sufficient time? And this is definitely available, and I'm always also reachable via email if there are any questions and concerns in this regard.
Yes, we can stop, but maybe we can come back to this project later if we have time after the questions and answers, or we can hear from the participants that are present today. So we invite you to raise your hand and unmute your microphone and mute it again after the questions, or to use the Q&A window, which has to be open, or the chat. And you can take this opportunity to ask Ruediger, who's an expert in this area, and can of course share with you his knowledge, but also his great experience. And so take advantage of this opportunity. If you would like to hear from about the project in Tanzania, we can come back to it after the questions and answers if we have time. So to raise your hand, you can click on the menu React and then click on the raise hand menu.
Hello, Melissa Lim from the BRS Secretariat. Can I ask a question while the participants gather their thoughts?
Of course.
More than appreciated, Melissa.
Sorry, when I looked at the React, I couldn't find the raise hand button, so I had to take the floor to ask.
It's no problem.
Ruediger, thank you for this great overview of the trends. It was very informative. You mentioned transboundary movements and how much a lot of it's still happening, legally or illegally. I'm wondering, what are your views on the impact that the recent amendments to the Basel Convention on e-waste will have on this type of trend?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is very speculative, I must say. It's according to my experiences in this regard, Melissa. I think it will have a substantial impact. That's no question. But on the other hand, if we look to what is happening on the ground, I mean, these shipments will still happen. There's no question in my understanding about it. And there are a lot of players will still find the loopholes in the system. And, you know, the one unsolved issue is simply the distinguishing between used equipment and waste as such. It's a standing issue under Basel per se, and we don't have a good solution. And on the other hand, I'm also a strong advocate to say that we should do also our utmost to extend the lifetime of equipment. because the biggest environmental footprint is simply because of the production. And the production of most electronic equipment is so resource intense. So coming up with an immense ecological footprint, so that every attempt in order to extend the lifetime of production should be favored. On the other hand, we must do much better also when we look to the international shipments happening, that the infrastructure, the policies, the collections and so forth in the recipient countries must be substantially improved. And I think there are a lot of good ideas and actions taken at the moment, but it's also our role to assess it later on, Melissa, once really things are implemented according to the improvements in the Basel Convention, whether it has the fruits we all want. You're muted now.
Thank you, Ruediger, for this answer. And of course, we are also attentive to the first reports, national reports, which will include the codes, the new codes, and the transboundary movements with the new codes. I hope Melissa can let us know when this will happen, and it's I think next year, and also, as my colleague Carla is connected, the Basel Convention requested the expert working group on e-waste to develop a guidance on codes to be used for e-waste, different types of equipment upon becoming waste, and also the part and the process part. And this is also a very interesting exercise that is happening under the Basel Convention, and it will be an interesting guidance which will be submitted to the COP for the first time to the next COP, COP 18.
One interesting aspect in all this is definitely also that we need to further research a little bit the situation of the exporting countries. We know a lot what is happening in the importing countries at the moment. We also performed ourselves this person in the port study, for example, looking at the terminals of Lagos harbor in Nigeria and assessing the situation for 1 year. What is exactly happening? What quantity is coming in? How is it looking like, etc. So reviewing such kind of activity on the one hand side is very important. On the other hand side, we have too little information on what are the dynamics, what are the drivers of the exporting countries as well. And when we look to the actors, etc. So going to Hamburg Harbor, going to Rotterdam, going to Antwerp, etc., to have a much better understanding, because people are very smart here and they are very creative also to keep their business going in the future. That's at least what I found out when talking to these people. And we should not underestimate the creativity also to find, as said earlier, the loopholes in the system.
Thank you, Ruediger. I now read a question from German customers. What would be a good solution to ensure traceability of second-hand e-waste sent to developing countries? As we all know, it hinders collection and recycling targets. So what would be a good solution to ensure traceability of second-hand and equipment and e-waste sent to developing countries?
Yeah, that's I mean, if I would have the answer now, then yeah, probably a lot of discussions and working groups, etc., could be terminated. I don't have it right now. I must confess. It should be quite simple in order to let business also happen to a certain extent. It should also be quite simple in order to allow also these exports happening of used equipment. if it's really then there for reuse and not only to get rid of waste or old equipment and ship it somewhere else in order to prevent certain costs arising here in our region, etc. Traceability with all this, one might now consider that a certain GPS system is used for it or certain other monitoring equipment. AI could probably also supplement to a certain extent. There is a lot ongoing at the moment, but the ultimate solution, I don't have it.
Thank you, Ruediger. I guess this is a very difficult area.
Yeah, but it's a very fair question, because that's really our target, what it should be. And we should always probably remind us, okay, that's what we need to find out and continuously work on. But I'm afraid I'm now 54 years, that until my retirement, probably there might not be the ultimate solution out yet.
Yes. Thank you for this. We can certainly add that there is hope in new procedures, like, for example, the e-procedure for the peak process under the Basel Convention, and also other tools, for example, digital product passports, which can help in recycling and extracting materials, but also tracing the origin of different equipment, which is exported. So there are possibilities to improve in the exchange of information on flows, and these are in the making in many cases.
Maybe I can express also a certain dream here, and that's probably getting us closer to a good solution. And I've been a strong advocate since long on these dematerialization aspect. So that means in practice that we are no longer purchasing the equipment as such, but only the service the equipment provides. Practically, it means that the ownership remains really with the manufacturer or service provider. So, and if the service provider concludes, because of feedback from the consumer also, that the equipment needs to be replaced because it does not apply all features anymore, provide the service and the quality it wants, etc., then the service provider or manufacturer must ensure that the equipment is returned to him or her, because it's still owned by the manufacturer or service provider. And this could substantially probably help in order to close loops. And that we as a consumers do also not to have worry about what to do with the equipment when it's broken down, when it's no longer usable, etc., because we are not owning it. It's owned by the service provider and manufacturer, and he or she can also get his hands for good recycling, etc., taking up its own individual responsibility. So this could be a very interesting model for closing loops, still allowing also shipments of equipment which are substantially used yet, but still functional and useful also for people. But by this still ensuring that it must return to the manufacturer at end of life because it's owned by them. So it's also a new level of extended producer responsibility and so forth. It will require a lot, psychological breakthroughs when it comes to ownership and so forth. But maybe we need to think also a little bit more in this domain, because we also realize in all the research we do around e-waste that we have a lot of technological solutions in place. Many of them are not implemented because of cost reasons, but we still do know too little when it comes to psychological, cultural, and so forth aspects, which are obviously also creating obstacles, in setting up certain solutions.
Thank you, Ruediger. And now I will read a question from Arej A. Ambar, is it possible to control the income and outcomes of e-waste by manufacturing processes? Like, for example, set limitation for manufacturing devices and on this on worldwide scale. So at least it will be possible to predict how much we are expecting of e-waste and how we can deal with it as we have predicted.
This is very much also the basis of the work we do when we do our e-waste statistics. So we have a good understanding how much is produced, generated, shipped, etc., according to electronic statistics, imports, export statistics. We also update regularly information when it comes to lifetime of equipment and so forth. So this is definitely happening already. This is why I think the data we are introducing also in all our various monitors are rather robust. But there are all the other elements within, which always need further fine-tuning. That's definitely, there are tremendous changes also with the usage time of equipment. I mean, it's a few years ago, everybody felt like mobile phones, for example, are only used for about 1 year, probably a bit more. There seems to be a tendency that now lifetime of mobile phones is extended to a certain extent. I'm not speaking now about many years, but people are using it now for probably 2 or 3 years and no longer only for 1.5 years, etc. And we see these changes, etc., ongoing. And this calibrating, etc., is very important in order to further improve all the numbers.
Thank you, Ruediger. We also have some schemes which are put in place by producers, whereby they collect as many equipment as many they have put on the market. And this is some producers take responsibility at the global level through this type of schemes. But this is not in the regulations and is not a principle for all the producers. But it is something that is in the direction of the question that was posed.
And the producers themselves, they also lack a lot of information themselves. For example, one of the focus areas we are also concentrating on at the moment is the recyclability of products on the request of the original equipment manufacturers, because there are, on the one hand side, expecting that standards for recyclability of products will be upcoming sooner than later. On the other hand, they really know very little how recyclability is actually performed by the recycling happening in various countries around the world. Because there are different standards in the US than it is in Germany, Italy, or China, for example. And here a proper assessment of the situation in order to also investigate further improvement on recyclability through the installed processes is very much at stake.
Thank you, Ruediger. I don't know if there are other questions from the participants, either in the chat or in the Q&A. If not, I have another question for you. It's really a curiosity on the recyclability of key materials for the digital and in the energy transition. What is your opinion on the improvements needed to recycle more these materials in e-waste? I refer to rare earths or rare minerals, which are included in many devices.
Yeah. I see a very strong contradiction how it's taken up. This issue is taken up in the political domain and how it's taken up in the economic domain as well, as mentioned earlier. Because at the moment still, the prices on the global market for originally mined critical raw materials, rare earth, etc., are still lower than anything what you can do from urban mining in this regard. And this is why the collection, etc., is so limited. So that means at the end of the day, obviously the prices are too low. So in order to really strive to a service-oriented approach in recycling much more these critical raw materials, these rare earths, etc. And that's a contradiction which is happening. I mean, it's very hard to understand why, for example, the European Union at the moment is developing its own CRM Act, whereas we are still wasting enormous CRMs from the e-waste we have, especially looking to rare earth, where also in Europe, the actual recycling rate is close to zero. This is missing logic, complete logic at the end of the day. And here realities, economics, and policies must come together at the end of the day in order to really let happen tremendous changes in the present procedures.
Thank you, Ruediger, for this answer, which comes from your experience and many years of research in this area. And I think this is an important area of further analysis and research needed. Our time is concluded, so unless I see other questions from the participants, I take this opportunity to thank Ruediger for this presentation and for these exchanges as well in the questions and answer session. And also a big thank you for having made it, even if you had some difficulties this morning with your train. So we really appreciate your effort. And I wanted to thank all the participants that gathered today. And I don't want to miss a big thank you to Artem and also Filomena, who are my colleagues helping with the webinar sessions related to the MOOC. We thank you all for your participation, and we close the session, but we remind you that the same session is repeated this week on Thursday, 30th of October in Spanish. So, and we invite you to check the schedule of the upcoming sessions in November, where we will introduce the 2 other courses that were not yet introduced. The course on inclusive recycling and the course on conformity assessment. So we hope to see you again next week, this week when in Spanish session, maybe all of you speak in Spanish, and in November for the introduction of the 2 last courses. So thank you very much, and see you soon connected online and through the MOOC. Thank you.
Thank you.